next week. That number has gone down to 0 doses. Now, I want to share some positive news, though. The government here in Ontario had set a goal to vaccinate all long-term care residents who wanted to be vaccinated in the hotspots here in the province. Toronto, Windsor-Essex, Peel and York region. Not only all long-term care home residents in those regions, but staff. So the deadline, the goal at least, was January the 21st. The province has been able to complete that, and they've also began the first dose of vaccinations for long-term care home residents and staff in other regions, including Ottawa and Durham. So there's some positive news. On the note of vaccine not coming here, Premier Ford says, hey, President-elect Biden, why not share some that you have?
We're the third largest trading partner in the world. Ontario is. Just Ontario alone. We're your third largest trading partner. We're the #1 customer to 19 states. A lot that elected you, Mr. President, and 9 other states that were #2. The least thing you could do in Kalamazoo, where the Pfizer plan is, great relationship building, give us 1 million vaccines. You have 100 million down there. Give your great neighbor that stands shoulder to shoulder with you 1 million vaccines to keep us going, get us over the hump.
What Pfizer and I believe the federal government have said to us is that, yeah, we have some short-term shortages, some short-term disruptions to the allocations, but we will make up in late February and March what we have missed, and therefore in the first quarter, our phase 1, we will have the same number of vaccines allocated to us that we expected all along and that we've been planning to use.
So based on retired General Hillier's comments there, it looks like even though there is a temporary delay, eventually here in the province, we will be on track. When I asked General Hillier if we will be on track to have mainstream Ontario, as he calls it, begin vaccinations either at the end of July or early August in the summer, he says so far yes, but once again that depends on supply. We also heard from the federal government today that any Canadian who wants to be vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine will be able to have access to it by the end of September, despite this Pfizer shipment delay. Rashmi.
Thank you, Christina. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government has been in constant contact with Pfizer after the company announced the delay. For more on this, we're joined live by CP24's Jackie Crandalls. Jackie?
And we first heard about this story last week, news that Pfizer was going to be reducing the number of vaccines it was rolling out of its European plant because they're doing some upgrades there to keep up with production needs. We're getting a bit of an update today and more comment from the government as to exactly what that means, how severe the impact is going to be. And in fact, the picture has sort of changed from what we were hearing from the government last week versus what we're hearing today. We're learning that next week this country is not going to receive any doses of the Pfizer vaccine. Last week the government said that the shipment would be cut in half, but obviously that has now changed. That should be the worst of it in terms of the delays as a result of what's happening in Europe. In terms of the production delay, Pfizer warned that the temporary delays were going to happen last week. Again, expansion plans at its European manufacturing plant. Initially, this was going to be a 50% reduction week over week for the next 4 weeks, but we got an update today from the government, including Major General Denny Fortin, who's basically in charge of the federal rollout of the vaccine. He said this week's shipment is 82% of what was expected, so that's obviously more than 50%. Next week's impact, obviously, though, is worse. Here's more from him and the Prime Minister.
The next week's deliveries have been deferred by Pfizer in their entirety. To clarify, we're informed by Pfizer this morning that that the Pfizer vaccine to Canada in the week of 25 January. It will start back up in the first 2 weeks of February to expected numbers, modified numbers as we shared last week. So about half of what we had originally expected.
We recognize that standing up manufacturing processes take time, and that's why we've ensured to be part of the very first wave of vaccinations of any country around the world, and we continue to receive doses. The Pfizer manufacturing facility in Belgium is retooling to be able to produce even more vaccines for distributing to countries and people who need them, and that is causing a momentary delay in their production, but we have been assured by Pfizer that we will still be able to meet our commitments to Canadians.
As we heard there from Fortin, they are expecting to ramp back up production back up in the first 2 weeks of February. Things should be back to normal. And we learned today that the procurement minister is on the phone with Pfizer every single day. There were some questions for the prime minister today as to why some European countries aren't being impacted by this change at the manufacturing plant and why Canada has been, but they weren't really able to provide any clarity as to why. The messaging, though, stays the same as it was last week on news of this delay, and that is that anybody who wants to be vaccinated in this country by September will still be able to do so. Back to you for now.
Thanks, Jackie.
Okay.
The Ontario NDP is making an urgent call for paid sick days. There's been a growing list of politicians, health officials, and advocacy groups calling on the province to supplement the federal sick leave program, which they say isn't enough. The NDP says more needs to be done to protect frontline and essential workers during the pandemic, especially in communities like Scarborough, which has seen a greater impact of COVID-19.
The average positivity rate in Ontario is about 6.6%. The positivity rate in Scarborough is ranging between 20 to 27%. My community is home to many low-income, racialized, marginalized workers dealing with unsafe workplaces and employment insecurity. My community is home to essential frontline workers, many of whom are in healthcare and are putting their lives on the line every single day to keep people protected and to keep this province running.
Employment standards are literally the responsibility of provinces. Employment standards, which is what a paid sick day would be captured under in terms of legislation, is an employment standard. A paid sick day is a standard that every worker should be able to rely on in the workplace, and that is a provincial responsibility. So again, it's pretty convenient that Ford decides to lob things off to Trudeau when he doesn't want to solve the problems that exist in our province, and that's a complete abdication of responsibility, and it's shameful to watch.
Yesterday, Premier Doug Ford said there's no need for the province to intervene in the federal sick leave program, but he also isn't ruling out action. Ottawa's program provides people with $500 per week for up to 2 weeks if they're unable to attend work because of COVID-19. It's a temporary program that's been criticized for insufficient money and processing times. A new poll finds a significant number of Canadians would support a nightly curfew to reduce the spread of COVID-19. 65% of those surveyed said they would be in favor of a temporary curfew in their province if it was recommended by public health officials. This is according to a poll by Leger and the Association for Canadian Studies. That number rose to 74% in Quebec. The province imposed a month-long curfew 10 days ago. Another Leger poll finds that the mental health of Canadians is suffering as the pandemic drags on. More than 1 in 5 rate their mental health as bad or very bad. That's up 8 points since last April. 32% rated their mental health as excellent or very good, a 10-point drop. The survey was conducted from January 15th to the 18th. Now, after a petition by some dog walkers looking to have their job declared essential, the province has amended the rules. When the lockdown took hold, dog walkers had to hang up their leashes. The rules limited pet services to veterinary care and service animal training. Some argued that walking services should be included for the health and welfare of the animals. A representative with the Ministry of Health now tells CP24 pet walkers are considered part of a service that is necessary for the immediate health and welfare of animals. Police have arrested a man wanted in the city's first homicide of the year. 24-year-old Guled Mohammed has been charged with second-degree murder in a stabbing on Eglinton near Midland on last Wednesday. A 25-year-old Minnesota man was killed. News of Mohammed's arrest comes 2 days after police issued a warrant for his arrest. He is due to make his first court appearance today. Police have released an image of a third suspect wanted in the murder of Shane Stanford. They're looking for this man. He's described as having a light brown complexion, in his mid-20s, about 5'10", with a thin build. He was wearing a dark jacket, maroon track pants, and dark shoes at the time of the murder on October 7th in the Bathurst and Rainy Avenue area. Police also released a video of the vehicle that was used in the murder. Police say it's a 2005-2006 white Infiniti with gold rims and trim. It belonged to another suspect, Raheem McLaughlin, who is in custody. The car was sold just days after the shooting. Investigators are looking for whoever bought it. And police don't believe Stanford was targeted.
Shane lived in the area and was simply returning home from work. Through investigation, one of the suspects was identified as Raheem McLaughlin. Picture on the screen here, that's on the far left corner. October 29th, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and a second suspect was arrested and charged with accessory after the fact to murder.
33-year-old Shane Stanford was working as an instructor with the YMCA. Police described him as a valued member of his community. A worker in his 50s has died after an accident in North York. He was struck by a dump truck at around 8:30 this morning near Islington Avenue in Steeles. He was rushed to a trauma center where the Ministry of Labour says he died. The accident happened at a work site, meaning it'll be up to the Ministry of Labour to investigate the circumstances. 4:13 and -2. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Traffic and your full weather forecast coming up next. 24 meteorologist Chris Potter joins us live, and it is feeling colder than it really is out there.
And that's going to be the trend into tonight as well, Rashmi. A much colder northwesterly wind develops through the overnight, and with the wind chill, it will make it feel like the minus teens tonight and early tomorrow morning. But at least in the downtown core, it looks bright to start tomorrow with some highly localized lake effect snow in areas to the north. -1 currently in the city, feeling like -8. It feels like -11 in Kitchener, -10 in Orangeville. The winds are predominantly still from the west, gusty, with frequent wind gusts above 45 kilometers an hour. But with the westerly winds, it's really east of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay, especially in my neck of the woods up here in Barrie with the lake effect snow. But tomorrow morning, it will be marching southeast of Georgian Bay. It looks like it will cross the 400 in between Highway 9 and Highway 88. By the afternoon, that lake effect snow shuts off as the system moves in. Weaker snowfall expected, but it will be a little bit more widespread. Temperatures tonight in the city around -8. That's where we will be early tomorrow morning in the city with some highly localized snowfall to the north. Increasing clouds are then expected through the afternoon, will become overcast through the evening. It's overnight that a little bit of snow moves in for early Thursday morning. But by snow, at least in the downtown core, it looks like flurries with minimal accumulations. By the afternoon, it will be cloudy with limited clear breaks, primarily to the west. Highs around 3. By the evening, another round of flurries moves in. It looks like on and off flurries possible for Friday, a little bit cooler, more seasonable, if you will, with highs near -2. Lake effect snow will be probable once again east-southeast of Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. By Saturday, much colder winds kick in. Temperatures will start off around -11. We're set to rebound back up towards -6 during the afternoon, but it will likely feel closer to -12 during the afternoon, thanks to the winds. A little bit colder to start Sunday. Temperatures level off near -5. Increasing clouds are expected during the day. Flurries move in by the late evening. It looks like periods of light snow for Monday morning and possibly the early afternoon. Highs around -3 and then -4 for next Tuesday as we become mostly sunny. We're still a little cooler than average.
Well, keeping an eye on ongoing issues along the westbound lanes of the 409, it's been off limits for the last 2 hours or so. This is following a collision, not on the exit ramp to Kipling, but actually on Kipling itself. Actually, problems might have cleared because MTL moved their cameras, but the collision was impacting Kipling and Bethridge, and at this point, from what I know, it is still off limits. Now, once you get onto the rest of the 401, I've just seen some busy patches across the top, and it is pretty slow on the northbound DVP as you make your way north of Don Mills, all the way up towards the 401. Off the major routes, crews on scene of a collision blocking lanes on Kennedy and Huntington. Rashmi, I'll send it back to you.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by CapitalDirect.ca.
It is -2, feeling like -8. You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Coming up, today is President Donald Trump's final full day in office. Reports suggest he could be issuing a long list of pardons. We'll have the latest after the break. We are taking you live to a special send-off that was set up for U.S. President-elect Joe Biden. He has now arrived in Washington. If we can take a look here. Joe Biden arriving in Washington. We saw him earlier today addressing a crowd teary-eyed in Wilmington, Delaware, his hometown, as he takes off for Washington, and his plane has touched down now. He spoke earlier, and he was addressing the crowd, talking about how powerful it's going to be sworn into office tomorrow as the President of the United States of America. And he spoke about what Delaware means to him. Take a listen.
It's deeply personal that our next journey to Washington starts here, a place that defines the very best of who we are as Americans. I know these are dark times, but there's always light. That's what makes this state so special. That's what it taught me. It taught me the most. There's always light.
Meanwhile, today is Donald Trump's final full day as U.S. president. With more on this, we're joined live by CP24's Jamie Goodfriend. Jamie?
Yeah, in his last full day in office, President Trump is expected to issue more than 100 pardons. We know that there will be several criminal justice reform groups that will be looking to have their clients released, many of them who might be sitting in jail wrongfully convicted. But what we're not expecting is to include the more controversial or even outlandish criminals that characterize his earlier use of clemency powers, which included the likes of Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, and Jared Kushner's father. But according to the U.S. media, White House advisors are saying that the president was actually seeking advice about whether to issue a pardon for himself. But given the fact that he's got a Senate trial that will happen once the Biden administration takes over, that could make him look guilty. And earlier we caught up with CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver to talk about who else might be on the list.
It's expected he's going to issue about 100 pardons, and it's not totally unexpected. He's already given out dozens of pardons. Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner's father, just a few of the dozens of pardons he's given. Most of these have been Trump loyalists, people who have been longtime supporters of his, so that's what we're expecting today. What's interesting, though, is it's not expected to be a pardon for Donald Trump himself. A lot of people had speculated perhaps he would try to pardon himself, something nobody has ever done before, but it appears that's not the case. It also appears he's unlikely to pardon any members of his family or Rudy Giuliani.
Other individuals who could be on the list to be pardoned include former New York Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, who was convicted of corruption charges back in 2015 and was also sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. We can also see a couple high-profile rappers get pardoned as well, including Kodak Black, who's serving a 3-year sentence for weapons charges, and also Lil Wayne. And we're also, once again, we have live pictures, I believe, of Joe Biden exiting the plane, landing in Washington one day prior to inauguration. Let's take a look. Rashmi.
Thank you, Jamie. Now, there will be increased security presence around Toronto tomorrow as President-elect Joe Biden is sworn in. CP24's Steve Ryan joins us live with more on that. What should we know, Steve?
Well, Rashmi, the U.S. consulate here on University Avenue certainly is no stranger to being a place that is targeted by protesters. We have not heard any information with regards to if there will be any protests or demonstrations tomorrow, but I can assure you that the police have been gathering intelligence on all of what's going on for leading up till tomorrow. Anytime you've got a world event that can have significant ripple effects throughout other countries, those police agencies pay attention. So here in Toronto, they will be well prepared if in fact there is some sort of demonstration, most likely here at the consulate if it exists. And the job of the police at this demonstration, if one does exist tomorrow, will be to keep the peace, make sure that everybody has the right to protest lawfully and peacefully, and if those happen to get out of line, they could face arrest. But all in all, we can expect a bit of a protest tomorrow because it always happens on election days, especially the United States election, especially this being such a contentious election. I would expect to see some sort of demonstration tomorrow. May not be a lot, but the police will be ready for it regardless. I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Lawyers for Meghan Markle are asking a British judge to settle her lawsuit against a newspaper before it goes to trial. Markle's legal team argues the Associated Newspapers has no real prospect of winning the case. The Duchess of Sussex is suing for invasion of privacy and copyright infringement after 5 articles that contain portions of a letter to her estranged father were published in February 2019. Associated Newspapers is contesting the claim. A full trial is due to be held in the fall. 4:25 and -2, you're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24. The Trudeau government continues to face questions about the delays on the delivery of vaccine supplies. We'll hear the response straight ahead.
Public health updates as a nationwide vaccination campaign continues. On air, online, and on the iHeartRadio app on CP24.
Have you ever walked into a big...
I'm Harold the Mortgage Closer. Do you own a home in the GTA?
The premier responds to news Pfizer is delayed delaying vaccine shipments to several countries, including Canada. The province is demolishing the buildings at the Foundry site on Eastern Avenue. We'll have details and reactions straight ahead. After a petition by some dog walkers looking to have their job declared essential, the province has amended its rules. More on that just ahead. From 299 Queen Street West, this is Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Hello, I'm Rashmi Nair. Ontario is reporting 1,913 new cases of COVID-19, 46 more deaths. However, the province says the case count is likely being underreported due to a technical issue at Toronto Public Health. 550 of the new cases are in Toronto, 346 are in Peel, 235 are in York Region. Testing also fell significantly, with just 34,351 tests processed over the past 24 hours. Now, the province is reacting to news Pfizer is delaying vaccine shipments to several countries, including Canada. For more on this, let's go live to CP24's Christina Tanalia. Christina?
Yeah, so this was announced last week due to manufacturing upgrades at Pfizer's Belgium plant. There would be delays to vaccines coming to this country. Well, now we're learning that not only will there be no vaccine shipments this week here to Canada, but of course that also means the impact trickles down here to the provincial level. So the province here of Ontario was anticipating initially about 81,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine for the week of January the 25th. Then that was downgraded to about 15,000 considering the delays. Now they're getting zero next week. To have a bit of positive news here, the government is a bit ahead of schedule in terms of the goal they set for themselves, or at least that's the goal they shared with us, to inoculate all Ontario long-term care home residents who wanted the vaccine in the COVID hotspots of Toronto, Peel, Windsor, Essex, and York. So they've completed that for all the residents and staff at those homes who wish to be inoculated. And they also got a head start on the first dose of the vaccines for those long-term care home residents and staff in other units, public health units, including Simcoe, Durham, and Ottawa. Now, the question is, of course, the concern, the long-term care home community. Is the government here on track to get all residents of Ontario's long-term care homes vaccinated by February the 15th with the first dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine? That is the goal. They believe they can still make that goal. In the meantime, the Premier's hoping he could get some help from our neighbors south of the border.
It's troubling. It's a massive concern. My message to the federal government is that nothing else matters right now. Every day we're giving out less vaccines than we have the capacity to administer is a day we lose. Because this vaccine is the difference between life and death for the most vulnerable.
The sky is not falling. We are still running out of vaccination program. We are getting at that most critical of priorities, the number one priority as articulated to us by the Premier and the Government of Ontario, those in most vulnerable circumstances. We are doing that as rapidly as we possibly can, and the only needle is not going into the arms of those residents and essential caregivers in those establishments are the ones going in as second doses, because we don't want to miss that opportunity to complete the immunity program.
So once again, all the deadlines or goals at least the government sets for itself are based on supply. When I asked retired General Rick Hillier if we're still on track to provide the opportunity for anyone in Ontario who wants the vaccine to begin receiving it at the end of July or early August, he says yes, but again, that depends on supply. So a lot of uncertainty surrounding all of this. Really, I don't think the government can make any promises here in the province. There we go, double P's there. But of course, they have set goals that they hope to meet. Again, it's all contingent on if and when they get the vaccine in their hands from the federal government. Back to you.
Thanks, Christina. Now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government has been in constant contact with Pfizer after the company announced the delay. For more on this, we're joined live by CP24's Jackie Crandall. Jackie?
And of course, we first learned this news from Pfizer last week, Rashmi, and the details then were that the delays in the shipments were going to result in a 50% reduction in what was expected over the next 4 weeks. So a bit of an update today from the federal government that now says next week there won't be any shipments of the Pfizer vaccine coming to this country. They say that should be the worst of it, though, in terms of the negative impacts From this production delay, Pfizer warned of temporary delays last week because of expansion plans at its European manufacturing plant. Major General Denny Fortin said today this week's shipment is at 82% of what was expected, so not 50%, which is better. But next week's impact is, of course, worse. Here's more from the Prime Minister and Procurement Minister Anita Anand, who has been on the phone with Pfizer every day.
We always knew that in manufacturing global vaccines at the scale that is going to be needed to end this pandemic, there were going to be challenges for certain companies in certain situations, which is one of the reasons why we took extra care to sign more contracts with more potential vaccine makers than most of our allies, and indeed have secured more doses per person than any other country, because we knew there would be challenges. But even with the announced delays by Pfizer, we are confident we're remaining on track to receive all the promised doses we had signed for by the end of Q1.
This was very disappointing, and I spent the weekend on the phone with Pfizer executives and my team. We reiterated firmly the importance for Canada to return to our regular delivery schedule as soon as possible. Pfizer assured us that it is deploying all efforts to do just that. This is an evolving situation, but I will continue to update Canadians as soon as I have additional information.
Canada is not the only country to be impacted by this production delay, and both the Minister and the Prime Minister were asked today why some countries in Europe, for example, are still receiving some shipments and Canada isn't receiving any next week, despite these daily conversations with Pfizer. There was no real answer on that, although there was reassurance today that 6 million people will be vaccinated in this country by March, and anyone who wants to be vaccinated against COVID-19 by September will have the opportunity to do so. Back to you for now.
Thanks, Jackie.
Okay.
The Ontario NDP is making an urgent call for paid sick days. There's been a growing list of politicians, health officials, and advocacy groups calling on the province to supplement the federal sick leave program that's put in temporarily for COVID-19. The NDP says more needs to be done to protect frontline and essential workers during the pandemic, especially in communities like Scarborough, which has seen a greater impact of COVID-19.
This work without access to paid sick days, who must get on crowded buses, then go home and expose elderly relatives to risk. What this means is that if a worker wakes up feeling a little unwell, not too sure whether or not they have COVID-19, not too sure if they have this, what these symptoms mean, they're forced to choose between staying home and staying safe. So in order to get tested, you risk losing pay. If you need to isolate, you risk losing your job. Is this really a choice for people to stay home?
Doug Ford just doesn't, he's choosing not to do it. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to spend the money. And as a result, the virus continues to spread, particularly in places like Scarborough, where we have, lots of essential workers, lots of frontline healthcare workers, many people who are working, precarious and low-income jobs who have no sick days at all. And are, as I said, being put in an untenable position of having to decide, do I protect my pay or do I protect, people in my community?
Yesterday, Premier Doug Ford said there was no need for the province to intervene in the federal temporary sick leave program, but he also isn't ruling out action. Ottawa's program provides people with $500 per week for up to 2 weeks if they're unable to attend work due to COVID-19. The program has been criticized for insufficient money and processing times. A rise in cases has New Brunswick officials warning of a potential lockdown.
We have never been in a situation like this since the pandemic began. We've never had so many cases. We haven't never been surrounded by such record high numbers of cases to the north and to the west. We do not yet know if new strains of COVID-19 are present in New Brunswick, but they pose an additional real threat.
New Brunswick reported 31 new cases today and 1 additional death from the disease. There are currently 316 active cases in that